everybody had a great weekend. You guys saw last week here on the pod, I ranked every single Western Conference team for the 2026 season. The Western Conference is very tough because obviously it's top heavy, it's middle heavy, and there's not a lot of quote unquote bad teams in the West right now. The East, it's a little bit different, and I'm not gonna lie, I love the Eastern Conference right now just because of how wide open, and I don't think anybody can accurately predict what the East is going to look like next year with all the injury variables, teams that are young taking a step going forward, teams that were maybe good last year taking a step back, and it's gonna be fun to rank every single team within the Eastern Conference into different tiers today. Like always, you guys can let me know in the Spotify comments or the YouTube comments what you agree with or disagree with, and I'm excited to break this all down. All right, so we have basically a bunch of different tiers that are going to coincide with all these East teams. So top tier, I have can win the conference. Teams that I think have a realistic chance at winning it. Yes, there's teams that I'm going to have not in this conference, or excuse me, in this tier that are maybe in tier 2 or tier 3 that could win the East. I definitely didn't have Indiana as a tier 1 team last year, a team that ended up going to the NBA Finals to game number 7. But I'm going to have 3 teams here in the top conference that I just think have the best shot at winning the East next year on paper. Next year, I have Frisky because of the exciting depth that they have. Maybe they were good last year and they had an early exit. Maybe they just have a young core that just internally they can improve and they could be a tier 1 team by the end of it. I have a tier 3 they're a good team, definitely a good team on paper, but one injury and they're probably done. So yeah, they have a lot of pressure on their top star. And if they are not performing or if they get hurt, then it's not going to be the best season. I have things need a lot of things to go right for this team. So, hey, there's a chance they end up as the 11th or 12th seed, but there's a chance they could end up as a 3 or 4 seed if everybody clicks, if everybody stays healthy, if everybody gels together on that team. I have Frisky and Young. I think I'm only actually going to have one team in that tier. And then I have not tanking, but wink, wink, they kind of are tanking. So, yeah, we could start off. We're going to go probably top down. I want to spend a lot of time on the good teams. And don't worry, I'm going to talk a lot about the bad teams. And I may do a podcast episode this offseason just kind of highlighting the teams that are obviously smaller market bad teams that, you know, we can maybe be a little bit more optimistic with going forward. So first team that I think can win the Eastern Conference, it's no surprise here. I do have the Cleveland Cavaliers, a team that won 64 games last offseason, and they pretty much kept everybody on this roster. They re-signed Sam Merrill on a 4-year deal. They traded Isaac Okoro for Lonzo Ball because they probably weren't going to give Ty Jerome that 3rd year because he left for the Memphis Grizzlies. They also brought in Larry Nance Jr., and I was very adamant, or at least vocal, on the Cavs adding a big man depth piece because behind Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley last year, it's Dean Wade, who would play a little bit stretch 5, and Tristan Thompson. Now, I don't even know if Tristan Thompson is back. I don't think he's officially back. Either way, it doesn't matter because Larry Nance Jr. is the backup. We don't need to see Tristan Thompson in his 35-year-old season get minutes whatsoever for this team. And they drafted Tyrese Proctor. So I'm intrigued about the backup guard depth, which I think is good on paper, behind Darius Garland, who's had some injuries, and he's already injured in the offseason, with Lonzo Ball, Craig Porter Jr., and Tyrese Proctor. I think there's something there that they could be okay. I don't think either one of those 3 is going to have as good of a year as Ty Jerome had last year, but we saw how much Ty Jerome meant in the regular season, but struggled in the playoffs in round number 2 against Indiana. And maybe there's going to be times where Donovan Mitchell is the lead ball handler as well. That's something we see in the playoffs. And I think this team, I mean, if they are a 4 or 5 seed at the deadline next year, they could make a shocking move. I really want to see Evan Mobley as the full-time 5. We're probably never going to see that as long as Jarrett Allen is there. We'll see with this team being a repeat offender in the second apron. Especially if they don't make it to the conference finals next year, then maybe we'll eventually get to a Jarrett Allen trade with Mobley at the 5 or a Garland trade with Donovan Mitchell being the full-time 1 going forward. But this team, like I said, won 64 games last year. They were one of, or pretty much the second best regular season team, and they ran most of this core back. I know they had a disappointing round 2 exit yet again, losing in round 1 in the first year with Donovan Mitchell against the Knicks, losing in round 2 2 years ago to the Boston Celtics when they were banged up. And they were banged up against the Indiana Pacers with Garland, Hunter, Mobley, all dealing with some type of injuries. And hey, that's no excuse. Everybody is injured come playoff time. But I do think, I mean, that game 2 collapse really just changed the whole course of that series because Cleveland could have easily tied that up 1-1. And I think there's a good chance they were tied 2-2 going back to Cleveland for game number 5. And who knows, they could have gone up 3-2. On paper, they were the better team than Indiana. Obviously, that didn't happen because of Halliburton's heroics and the Cavs collapse in game number 2. But like, I can't give you, I mean, they are the best team on paper, in my opinion, going into next year's season. 64 wins, dominated the New York Knicks throughout the regular season, a team we'll get to in a second. But I do think, even though they didn't make it to the conference finals, Donovan Mitchell, who I know Embiid gets a lot of flack about not making it to the conference finals, neither has Donovan Mitchell. And now going on year 4 in the East, this is a great team. It's an expensive roster, but I do think they can obviously win the conference. It's so wide open as it is. I think they were going to be a tier 1 team, even if there weren't the injuries to Boston or Indiana next year, either way. And I'm really excited to watch Cleveland next year. I mean, Mobley took that leap a little bit more offensively. I don't know if we'll ever get that full Mobley, like 20 point per game season leap, and like ball initiating and creativity with him. That's so unique for somebody at his size. And obviously, he just won Defensive Player of the Year. So he's giving you insane value on that end of the floor and can just keep improving on the margins year by year. He can really turn into one of the 10 best players in the NBA very soon. We know Donovan Mitchell is a top 20 player, and like Garland, Allen, what Dean Wade can do defensively. They kept Strus this offseason. You have, like I said, that point guard rotation depth, and DeAndre Hunter, who fit like a glove after the deadline. They have a good coach, Kenny Atkinson, reigning coach of the year, or did he win it? Yeah, right. He won it last year. Either way, this is the clear tier 1 team in the East, and probably the 1-1 in the East right now. Now, I have also the Knicks in the first tier. I think, even though you guys know I'm a Knicks fan, I don't think this is too much of a biased take. You could make an argument the Knicks weren't a tier 1 team if Boston and Indiana were healthy. If you only wanted to have 3 teams in there, I think if Boston and Indiana were healthy, and maybe Boston didn't trade Kristaps and Drew, you could make an argument for sure that you'd rather have Cleveland, Boston, Indiana ahead of New York going into next year's season. But the Knicks, I think, have had a very productive offseason, even though it's not been the flashiest. They didn't lose any of their starters or rotational guys that were mainstays last year. Now, the Knicks do have 1 veteran minimum remaining. Could they go out and get a Brogdon? Could they get a Russell Westbrook, a Ben Simmons? Maybe they bring back a Landry Shamet, bring in a Trey Lyles to reunite with his former coach, Mike Brown. Either way, I think getting Jordan Clarkson on the veteran minimum, Clarkson is a better player than Landry Shamet, or Campaign. You could probably compare him more to Campaign. Either way, I think Clarkson will be an upgrade on the margins compared to what Campaign was for them last year. Way too streaky, and I think Clarkson a little bit better on the defensive end of the floor. He's not great by any means, but I think can hold his own and is going to be in a much more scaled down role than what he's been as like a top scorer in Utah, somebody that has a higher usage rate than you'd probably want. And I love them picking up Gershon Yabusele. The Knicks kind of needed that stretch 4 tweener in between, I guess, like the OGs of the world, the Mikal Bridges, who are sometimes, or even Josh Hart playing the power forward spot. You can have Gershon there, who has an opt out, and if he opts out, he's probably good next year. So I think you definitely take that if you're the Knicks. Gershon was one of the best storylines, in my opinion, last year, not playing in the NBA for years. And then Duncan LeBron in the Olympics, having a great Olympic run with Team France, and was very good on Philly last year. He was a top 5 player on the Sixers, good 3-point shooter, serviceable enough defender. And then that's what the Knicks needed to do. They needed to kind of improve this 8th, 9th, 10th spots in the rotation. We'll see if going from Precious Achiuwa to Ariel Hukporti right now is going to be fine. We'll see if Mike Brown is going to start Cat and Mitchell Robinson at the same time. We'll see if Mike Brown is going to maybe just prioritize Mikal Bridges' point of attack defense. Maybe Josh Hart comes off the bench and they could just spam Brunson, Cat, pick and roll, pick and pop, and which I wish we saw more with Tibbs last year implementing that. And we know Tibbs, he got so much out of this team, both offensively and defensively. I think they could have been better offensively, but something, everybody will give Tibbs a little bit of hate for, and that's always been his, down, or one of his quote unquote weaknesses is like he plays the starters too much. He relies too much on his top 6, 7 guys, and they're leading the league in minutes. Could run them into the ground. Now, the Knicks didn't really have that many injuries, so that could regress next year, and the Knicks could be a little bit more banged up, and they don't have the best depth in the world to withstand those injuries. But I do think, like, late in the games, that's why, like, Brunson, I think, got so much better as a clutch player too, is because he is so used to playing 40 minutes a night in meaningful games where he is not tired, he is not gassing with his usage. And you're watching like Tibbs kind of get too reliant on the Brunson high pick and roll, the Brunson isolation in the clutch, which I do think reflects him as a coach, sometimes not being able to be creative late in games. But Brunson, I think, handled that workload maybe as good as anybody can in the NBA outside of, like, I don't know, LeBron from a couple years ago. And obviously Steph and KD and a lot of those guys have a high clutch workload. But I think Brunson, for the minutes he plays, the usage he has, what he needs to do, because he's not the biggest guy out there, to create separation, to create contact. I think, like, for stamina-wise, it's very impressive what he can do in overtime or late in the fourth quarter. So I think the Knicks are, it's a good roster. I think they could win a title. I don't think I would be totally shocked if they were in the finals next year because of how wide open this East is. I don't think it would be a cakewalk by any means. I think the Knicks could beat Cleveland in a playoff series. They did it a couple years ago. Now, Cleveland owned the Knicks in the regular season last year, so that makes me kind of give a slight edge to Cleveland come playoff time if they matched up and they were fully healthy. I mean, Boston destroyed the Knicks throughout the regular season last year, and the Knicks were about to go up 3-1, even with the Tatum injury. But obviously, we won't know for sure because Tatum ends up not playing games, 4, 5, and 6. Or, excuse me, games 5 and 6. So I think it might come down to Cleveland, New York. We'll see. I mean, I'm not I wouldn't be totally shocked if the Knicks were not a top 2 seed next year. What were the Knicks last year? The 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. So I could see a possibility where the Knicks are the 4 to 5 seed, and maybe they go 50-32. But some of the teams that I also have, the other team in tier 1 or the tier 2 teams, are just so young and deep in the regular season and physical that they'll be just fine. Because hey, Cat, Brunson, Hart, Bridges, and Anunoby, they have a lot of miles on them from last year. I think it's nice that there's no Olympics. None of them are playing in Eurobasket or anything like that this summer. They should be fresh and ready to go. I'm just a little worried. Like, I know the Knicks improved the depth. I like them going from Tibbs to Mike Brown. I think they needed a new philosophy over there to get them over that hump. Maybe I'll like Dwayne Casey to Nick Nurse a couple years ago. I'm just a little worried that the Knicks could have a little bit more, I guess, just more injuries, just because I know Mitchell Robinson was out most of the regular season, but Mitchell Robinson's had his injury concerns in the past. Cat has as well, and Cat had a crazy workload last year. Same with Brunson, Hart, and Anunoby, Bridges. So something I'm keeping an eye on for the Knicks, but I do think they are a tier 1 team nonetheless. And my last tier 1 team, I think you can come down between 2 teams, both in the Southeast Division. I think you can give some love to either Orlando or Atlanta. And I think there could be a cop out. I could put 4 teams in tier 1. I don't want to do that. I'm going to give the edge to the Orlando Magic, and I'll tell you why. So one thing that I think matters a lot in the regular season and come playoff basketball is physicality, defense, slowing the game down, and being able to win with even in the 3-point line at times. Because a lot of guys, their 3-point shots obviously crater a little bit come playoff time. It's rushed. The defense goes up a notch. You're allowed to have a little bit more physicality, especially on the defensive end of the floor. I know they lost in 5, but I loved what Orlando did without Jalen Suggs in round number 1. And I think they got better this offseason. Now, so did Atlanta. I believe, I don't know if this is a hot take, Paolo Banchero will be better than Trae Young next year. I trust Paolo defensively more than Trae Young. So, hey, Trae Young's going to have the highest usage rate on the Hawks, but can we trust Trae Young in the playoffs defensively? I'm sure the offensive workload or the offensive production will offset it, but hey, teams matchup hunt. Teams just hunt guys consistently in the playoffs. And if we have Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, even Desmond Bane getting switched on to Trae Young in a playoff series, I kind of like my chances there. And Orlando, so they bring back Mo Wagner. They extended Paolo on that extension. They brought in Jace Richardson in the draft and Noah Penda. I'm not really sure how much of an impact those guys will have next year for this team. Obviously, they go out and trade. They needed shooting and another initiator this offseason, and they get that, Desmond Bane and Tyus Jones. I don't know if Tyus Jones is overrated. He wasn't great, especially defensively last year for the Suns, and I think he doesn't take as many chances as you would like. He likes to play very safe, which I think in this role in Orlando, I think they'll take that, right? You add Desmond Bane for one of the best shooters in the NBA and a great offensive swingman next to Franz and Paolo. They lose Cole Anthony and KCP in that trade. They lose Gary Harris to Milwaukee. They also lost Caleb Houston to the Atlanta Hawks, who we'll get to obviously soon. But I do like what the Magic did a couple years ago, going to Game 7 against Cleveland. Last year, I thought they were going to be a top 4 seed, and everybody gets hurt, right? Everybody gets an abdominal injury. Franz, Paolo, Suggs, all got hurt in some way, shape, or form. But you got to look up Paolo's like final month and a half of last year. He struggled in January when he came back. I mean, I talked about it on my Stross channel as a big breakout guy for somebody that can go from like a great player to an elite player next year who could be on an All-NBA first or second team next year, probably more likely second team. I just love the defense, and that's going to matter a lot in the playoffs. A lot can be reliant on or needs to come back as Franz's shot. Like that is such a massive swing for the Magic. If Franz could just go from a 28% three-point guy to a 33% three-point guy, but that's something we haven't seen in almost 3 years now. So I just like the defense. I think Atlanta has as good of depth as Orlando. I just trust this team a little bit more in a playoff series because I'll get to Atlanta in a second because they're going to be my first tier 2 team. I think they have a lot of question marks. I think they're great on paper and they improved a lot. But Orlando was better than Atlanta last year. Both of them had their injuries on paper, and you could say Orlando was banged up more than Atlanta. Because obviously Atlanta lost Jalen Johnson, but we can't be super reliant on Kristaps to be healthy. We can't be super reliant on Onyeka Okongwu to be the main rim protector for this team. And can we see a Risa Shea leap in some way, shape, or form? But yeah, Orlando, tier 1 team. I think there's a chance they could have more wins than the Knicks in the regular season. I don't think they'll have more wins than the Cavs in the regular season. But hey, shout out to the Southeast Division. Orlando, I mean, they haven't had a top 20 offense in a decade and a half, since like 2012, almost a decade and a half. So it's kind of crazy. I think they will finally crack that this year, especially with adding Desmond Bane. So obviously I just kind of spoiled it a little bit. I have Atlanta as my first tier 2 team. Like I said, I went back and forth between Orlando and Atlanta for that tier 1 spot. Atlanta was one of the big offseason winners in my opinion. They ended up basically signing Nickeil Alexander-Walker in with a trade exception they had from the DeJounte Murray deal last offseason. So it was like a second round pick or swap that got it done. They bring in Luke Kennard on a 1-year deal. They basically trade away Terrence Mann and a first for Kristaps Porzingis. This team had some big man depth questions last year because of injuries and how much can you trust Mo Gay or rookie Asa Newell who they drafted. So you bring in Kristaps Porzingis. They bring in Luke Kennard. They do lose Clint Capella, but honestly, I'd rather have the upside of Kristaps than Clint Capella. They lose Karis LeVert. They traded away Georges Niang and Terrence Mann in that Kristaps trade, and basically all the guys they traded for last year are gone. LeVert leaves. They trade Mann, Niang. They leave as well. And then who's the other guy? Well, no, it was Mann and Niang in the Hunter trade. Forget if there's one other guy. And then, well, I guess LeVert, right? And Mann was in the Bogdan Bogdanovic trade. They waived David Roddy. I like them picking up Caleb Houston. I think he can be a solid 3-point shooting option. I mean, I think this team is a lot of fun. I'm excited about Jalen Johnson. He could have won Most Improved Player last year if he didn't get hurt. I think this team could go as far as Jalen Johnson could be as a number 2 option. And they could stagger Trey and Jalen Johnson a little bit, because I think you're asking a lot out of a 20-year-old Risa Shea to be like a number 3 or 4 scoring option. I don't think that's going to happen. I think LeVert is probably going to have that tertiary scoring role. You have a Kobe Buffkin possibility, but we haven't seen it yet. I do like the big man depth. I love it, actually, of Okongwu, Newell, Mohamed Gay, and Kristaps. But there's a chance Newell may not be ready, especially for a playoff series. Okongwu may not be the defender they need him to be, but I like what we saw at the end of the year, especially as a floor spacer. And Kristaps can be that guy. Like Kristaps and Trae Young running the pick and pop, because of how lethal they are behind the 3-point line, can be one of the best pick and pop duos in the NBA in terms of point per possession for that specific category in the half court. But can Kristaps stay healthy, right? Like, we can't pencil him in for 70 games in the regular season or 55 games in the regular season, let alone getting 3 playoff series like of that. So I like this team a lot. I do. I think they're going to be a great and physical regular season team. If I had to say, if you told me Orlando or Atlanta, one of those teams was the 2 seed in the East, I'd probably still give the slight edge to Orlando. I think Paolo is better than Trae Young, or at least will be next year. But I think Atlanta is frisky. They could make it to the conference finals. I would be shocked if they were in the NBA finals, given where they were last year as a play-in team, even with the injuries. But I like Quinn Snyder as a coach. And I would just be shocked if they were in the NBA finals. I could see the path for Orlando. Because I think Orlando has the young internal development, and I think Atlanta does as well. I just don't know if we're going to see that next year, because I think Risa Shea is a big X factor, but that may be more of like a year 3, year 4, like, okay, this guy is a legit shot creator, elite 3-point shooter, which he was at times last year, and a great defender, which he's on the path to be. I like Atlanta a lot, and you can let me know. Would you take Orlando next year, or would you take Atlanta? So I do have just one other team in this tier as well, and that's going to be, I mean, shout out to this fan base, man. They've been through a lot. Detroit. Yeah, I have Detroit as a tier 2 team right now in the Eastern Conference. I think they're super frisky because of their depth. They won like 45-ish games last year after being the worst team in the NBA in the 2024 season. Nobody really expected them to be that good last year. I thought we could see a little bit of a leap. And we see Cade Cunningham as an All-NBA player. Jaden Ivey was playing the best basketball of his career before the injury. Star Thompson didn't get like a proper ramp up, but then gets really good in that second half. And that also helped out like Jalen Duren defensively, who I thought was really physical in the playoffs in round number 1 against the Knicks. Now they get Dennis Schroeder, was a great pickup. Tim Hardaway Jr. is in Denver. They bring in Duncan Robinson and Karis LeVert. I don't really think they get that much better, like losing. Well, we'll see about Malik Beasley. And they trade Fontecchio basically for Duncan Robinson. They lose Lindy Waters, which I don't think is a big loss either. But this team is really banking on internal development. Now, they basically traded a first round pick for Jalen Duren a couple years ago, and that pick got sent to Minnesota. So they didn't have a first round pick. I like Chaz Lanier, even though he didn't shoot well in the summer league. I don't think it really matters too much. So Ron Holland, Asar Thompson, Jaden Ivey, and Jalen Duren, I think are the big X factors for Detroit next year, because if those guys take the leaps we think they can take around a top 5 point guard in the NBA and Cade Cunningham and a top 15 player, this team could make it to the conference finals. They were very competitive against the Knicks in round 1. Hey, there was that, what was it? The Tim Hardaway Jr. corner 3, which you could make an argument he got fouled. I don't know if they would normally call. I'm a Knicks fan, so I'm going to view it a different way. But either way, that they were like a foul call there from maybe being up 3-2 at a point, right? And they could have won that series against the Knicks. So I think for a team that didn't have the expectations of, let alone like being in the playing tournament, let alone a top 6 seed, let alone winning 2 games against the Knicks, who were in a championship or at least the conference finals realistic aspiration period, you have to be thrilled about this team. JB Bickerstaff, I think, got the most out of this team last year. You still have some solid veterans around Cade, like LeVert, Tobias Harris, Duncan Robinson. I think they need Robinson to be a serviceable enough defender because he's got some big shoes to fill. Malik Beasley was a top 5 bench option last year and a top 5 shooter in the NBA. He, I think, led the league in 3-point shooting or close to it. And I think this team has the internal development because I'm really excited about Asar Thompson, who shares a lot of shares a lot of the same skills as his twin brother or men. Maybe not as good or as polished or as, I don't know, creative sometimes in the half court, but he's got the athleticism. He might be a better defender than Amen Thompson. So I'm really excited about Asar next year. Ivey's a big swing guy for sure. We'll see, because he was playing great basketball, like I said, before he got hurt. And I believe a ton in Ron Holland. And Jalen Duren, I think, can continue to improve. You have Isaiah Stewart as well, and they do have some assets to make a trade. Now they own all their first-round picks going forward, all their swaps as well, so if they wanted to get better at the deadline. I think this team's floor next year is probably if everything doesn't go right, or a lot of things go wrong, but if Cade can stay healthy, I think there's still a 9 seed, an 8 seed in the play-in, and that's if Holland, Ivey, Asar, Duren do not take leaps going forward. They could be a 2 or a 3 seed next year for sure. I think, those are my tier 2 teams. So here we go. We got 3 teams here in tier number 3. We have good, but 1 injury, and their season can get derailed. So there's an obvious first one here, the Milwaukee Bucks. This roster is not the best in the world. It's probably one of the worst Giannis rosters since 2017, 18. When they were a good team then. So they were very active this offseason, for sure. They brought back a lot of their guys: Chris Livingston, Kevin Porter Jr., Bobby Portis, Taurean Prince, Ryan Rollins, Jericho Sims, and Gary Trent Jr. They added Cole Anthony on the buyout market. Hey, Damian Lillard, the move in a bigger long-term macro view, not great. But in the micro view, Dame was not going to play a single minute for you in 26. And Miles Turner will. And Miles Turner will be better next year than what Brook Lopez was for you last year. So they get better technically. Gary Harris comes in. They lose Pat Connaughton, Vasily Micic, they waive. Damian Lillard, they obviously waive. And Brook Lopez goes to the Clippers. It's a deep team. It is in terms of okay depth. It's not super high quality. I don't think it's as deep as Orlando, Cleveland, or even the Knicks, or even the Pistons. But you have the best player in the Eastern Conference, even if everybody was healthy. Giannis is better than Tatum. Giannis, in my opinion, is better than everybody in the NBA, not named Nikola Jokic. And that could be a hot take to say. I know Shea just won MVP, but I do think Giannis was just as important last year to the Bucks than what Shea was to the Thunder. And that may be a hot take, but I still value what Giannis does on both ends of the floor. He was an elite mid-range shooter last year, kind of completely got rid of the 3-point shot in terms of volume there. Now, Kyle Kuzma, I hated the acquisition when it happened, and I don't know how he's going to be next year. It's a full offseason with Milwaukee, but I can't really say with confidence he'll be better than Chris Middleton next year. But I like Ryan Rollins' defense. I like the addition of Cole Anthony. Bobby Portis is still a good offensive player. Kevin Porter Jr. is still a good offensive player. Garrett Trent Jr. is still a good 3-point shooter. I think this team can be competitive. I would honestly pencil them in. I think they're going to go 44-38. They're going to be around a 5 or 6 seed. But just God forbid, there's a Giannis injury and Giannis misses 20 games next year. I can't see this team making the top 6 in the Eastern Conference. I can't. There's, I think, 5 teams here that I really like to make the top 6. Cleveland, New York, Orlando, Atlanta, and Detroit. Milwaukee could definitely be a top 6 team if Giannis plays 70-plus games next year. But I'm just saying, God forbid, I trust Atlanta without Trey, Detroit without Cade, New York without Brunson, Orlando without Paolo, and Cleveland without Donovan Mitchell way more than I trust the Bucks without Giannis Antetokounmpo next year. Doc Rivers, We'll see how he does in another year in Milwaukee. I do think they have like good depth though, where like, yeah, they could survive a Miles Turner injury. They could survive a Kyle Kuzma injury. They could survive a Garrett Trent Jr. injury because of like AJ Green being a good 3-point shooter there as well. And then you also, there's some other guy that I'm missing, right? Maybe not. Or Torian Prince, yeah, right, who they bring back, who was a great 3-point shooter last year. I don't think we're going to get a Tyler Smith leap next year, unfortunately, or a Bogoja Markovic year one impact. But I do think this team will be at least competitive. I think they're slightly better than what they were last year. So that's probably around what were they, the 6th seed last year? I think they're like a 6th, 7th, or 8th seed next year. I just would be very shocked if they were a 2 or 3 seed, unless Kyle Kuzma becomes bubble Kuzma again, and Miles Turner has by far the best year of his career, which isn't out of the equation. But like I said, I think they're a good team, but if Giannis gets hurt, they're screwed. Boston is going to fit this tier as well. If Jaylen Brown gets hurt, I mean, this may be one of the, like, I was thinking about putting them in the tier below Boston, but I don't think they're that much far behind Milwaukee. So I think like they're in the same tier. Boston, I mean, obviously they trade away Kristaps Porzingis, they trade away Drew Holiday, and Jason Tatum is out for the year next year. They just recently waived J.D. Davison. They drafted Hugo Gonzalez, Amari Williams, Max Shulga. They signed Josh Minot and Luka Garza. And George Niang and Anthony Simons were the big, quote unquote, big acquisitions from the Drew and Porzingis trade. I mean, you have a fringe all-star, all-NBA player in Derek White, who is just like a perfect complementary piece to any star. You have Peyton Pritchard, who's one of the best 3-point shooters in the NBA. That's a serviceable enough defender that won 6th Man of the Year last season. Anthony Simons is a good 3-point shooter. I don't think he does a ton of things extremely well, but he's a good offensive player. I mean, this team has so many question marks in the front court. Like, what is their opening night front court? Is it Jaylen Brown at the 4? Or is it George Niang at the 4 with Neemias Queta or Luka Garza at the 5? It's gross. And if Jaylen Brown gets hurt next year, this team they may not win 30 games. They may not win 35 games next year if Jaylen Brown does miss more than 20 games. So I'm honestly being a little bit generous to them, I think, putting them in this tier. I like Milwaukee a lot more. I would bet money that Milwaukee finishes with a better record for sure, because the Celtics front court is going to get eaten alive next year. There's only so much Derek White and Jaylen Brown and Peyton Pritchard can do offensively. And how many I like Josh Minot's defense. I don't think it's bad, but I don't trust George Niang's defense. I don't trust Anthony Simons' defense. And Neemias Queta may be a fine enough rim protector. I just think there's so many question marks with this team. I think you're asking a lot out of Hugo Gonzalez in his rookie year as well. So I think Boston is going to be they're going to be a good enough team. I think they can go 43-39 if Brown doesn't get hurt. But if Brown or White misses a significant amount of time next year, and Brown was banged up last year at times, I do think it could be a lottery season for Boston. And the last team I have in this tier is actually Philadelphia. I do think Philadelphia's got a good roster. Now, there's already an injury to Paul George. And like I said, they're a good team on paper, but if Joel Embiid gets hurt, yeah, this team is going to be in the lottery once again. And their pick is top 4 protected this year. It's not top 6. So there's a chance they could be in the lottery and have to give their pick to, you guessed it, OKC. They brought back Justin Edwards. Well, they kind of, gave him that extension because he was undrafted. One of the better rookies last year. Eric Gordon, Kyle Lowry, I don't think they're going to make much of an impact. They bring in Trendon Watford and Jabari Walker, right? Did they bring in Jabari Walker or am I tripping? I thought they brought in Jabari Walker. Either way, it doesn't matter. Who's serviceable enough for... No, maybe they didn't. I forget who brought in Walker. They drafted Edgecombe at 3, drafted Janai Broome in the 2nd round. Quentin Grimes hasn't re-signed yet, but I assume he's going to be back. Tyrese Maxey is an all-star caliber point guard, and Jared McCain is going to be healthy, who could have won Rookie of the Year. Paul George can't be much worse. Now, if he's not healthy, then maybe that is a possibility, but I think Paul George will be a little bit better, which is still a good enough player. Overpaid, yes, but still a solid enough player. Kelly Oubre is fine. I mean, they at least have big man depth behind Embiid and Drummond, Broome, and Bona. Maybe one of those players can be good next year, and we'll see about Embiid. There's no Olympics. He's had a whole offseason of rehab, and Embiid, even like last year, he wasn't great when he was out there, but he was so good in 2024 when he was healthy, and he was dealing with so much in the playoffs against the Knicks and was still a monster offensively. So, yeah, I love the guard depth on this team. Maxey, Grimes, McCain, and Edgecombe is elite as your guard rotation depth. We'll see, with no Gershon, we'll see if Watford, who I kind of liked last year, in Brooklyn, and we'll see how this team looks next year. They have so much variance. I like they could be in their own tier. I know like Zach Lowe in his Eastern Conference tier. Let's put them in their own tier. If Embiid does not play 50 games, 55 games, which is definitely a possibility, they could be, I don't know, they're going to be a low end playing team. But I would not be totally shocked if Embiid does play 50 games next year and Paul George plays 65 games, that the exciting young guard depth can propel this team to being the 6th seed in the East, right? I think I like them more than Boston, but I just think there's a higher injury risk for Philly, obviously. Like, I think there's a better chance that Embiid and Paul George miss 50 games combined than Derek White and Jaylen Brown going forward. Now, you could say the teams next up are better on paper than some of these teams, and that's completely fine. So a lot of people are high on Miami. I still want to see it, and I think a lot of things need to go, or some things, well, I guess need a lot of things to go right for this team going forward. So what I think is going to be a benefit, that's not an on the floor aspect, but no Jimmy Butler distractions at all, which was always looming over them last year. So I loved how Davion Mitchell played for them last year in the second half, and they basically gave him a 2-year deal. They got Fontecchio in the Robinson trade. Maybe not as impactful in a specific way as Robinson, but I kind of like Fontecchio in that stretch in 2024. I know he wasn't good for Detroit last year. They basically got Norman Powell for free, like Kyle Anderson and Kevin Love to an expiring Norman Powell. Kind of like low-key a great move for Miami. And then Anderson, Kevin Love, Duncan Robinson leave. I love them getting Kasperi Shakir-Chonis in the draft as well. He ends up being the 20th pick in the draft. Shout out to this NBA.com. Okay, here's the roster. They basically got nothing out of Rozier, and who knows if he's even going to play next year. I mean, he was so bad for them, which is a shame because he was so good in 23 before the trade. Kel'el Ware was a top rookie last year, and I'm really excited about him. Now, I could have Ware as the one, like, okay, could this guy take a little bit of a step back? I'm trying to think who that was from like the 23 class that maybe had a disappointing year too. Trying to like kind of go through that class in my head. It wasn't like Grady Dick or Koulibaly, maybe Jarris Walker, but like Ware did a lot more. It's just like I'm a little on notice about the Spoelstra comments this offseason, where he needs to have a more consistent professionalism and his motor on and off the floor, which was a big, somewhat red flag coming out of Indiana in that 24 draft. I like Highsmith and Marcin as like your 9th and 10th guys in the rotation. I don't think Hawkins can be much worse than he was last year. And I still think there's some upside in Jovic. And I didn't even mention their best guys in Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero. Hero was an all-star last year. He was fantastic. Bam was honestly, like, you look at Bam's numbers in the second half, they weren't bad whatsoever. And I am excited about this team. I don't know how much you could play Powell, Hero out there at the same time. But if you can run like an interesting 3-guard lineup of Mitchell, Powell, and Hero with Bam and Ware in the front court. I do think that could be serviceable enough defensively. And I would say I think every team in this tier, I do like the Heat. Now, like I said, they need a lot of things to go right. There needs to be like no Hero distraction. They need Bam to be a little bit more consistent offensively. They need Ware to improve on his rookie year. They need Hawkins to bounce back. Can they get anything out of Rozier? Are we asking too much out of Kasparis as a rookie? Now, I trust the head coach in Erik Spoelstra more than probably anybody in this tier list that I'm going to mention. So I just think they do need a lot of things to go right. I do think on paper, Milwaukee is a better roster. Philly has a better roster at full strength. Boston, it's tough. It is. I can see the argument for Miami against Boston. I'll leave it at that. I will. And then I think, yeah, Miami, I still view them as a playing team. But hey, if there's an injury to Brown, Embiid, or Giannis, I think they're the next team to take a leap. I have Indiana in here. This isn't really in order in the tiers because I think Indiana will be my worst team in this tier, but I'm just going to talk about them next. I don't love Indiana, and I think they have like a high 30s win projection right now. I think I would take the under on that. Now, I should trust their depth, right? Like, it took them very far in the playoffs, but I know there's been some very fun reverse dunk highlight packages of Jay Huff this offseason. I still need to see it before I can fully convince myself that Jay Huff and Isaiah Jackson can be as good enough as big man depth than what Turner was last year. Now, what if are you going to rely on James Wiseman if there's an injury to a big man, which are prevalent in the NBA? And Halliburton's out all of next year. So we're going to see Andrew Nembhard in a scaled up role. We're going to see Mathurin in a scaled up role. Aaron Nesmith in a scaled up role. How is that going to look? They obviously have great depth. McConnell was arguably the best backup point guard last year, probably number 2 or 3, because obviously Peyton Pritchard would be in there. and Ty Jerome, at least in the regular season. But he was amazing for them in the playoffs. Obi Toppin was amazing for them in the playoffs as well. I'm intrigued about Cam Jones. I really like Cam Jones in the draft. I do think he was a first-round player that they got in the second round. I'm intrigued about a Johnny Furphy year two. And I'm also intrigued about Jarris Walker and probably the most touches he will get in his career, which I'm thrilled about. I just wonder if Bennedict Mathurin, is it going to be enough of a initiator / playmaker now that his usage is going to go up? How is that going to look on paper? How is the rim protection going to look with no Miles Turner? Can Andrew Nembhard be a true ball handling point guard for this team? I think that's also asking for a little bit as well. So I think they have a lot of question marks. I do. With no Haliburton and Miles Turner. I do think, hey, if Furphy can show some progression, if McConnell and Nembhard could be basically Haliburton in the aggregate, if Mathurin can average 20 points efficiently, and I obviously didn't mention Pascal Siakam, who's not listed on there, or no, he's probably just down here. Yeah, because you have Pascal Siakam and you have Ben Shepherd, who I should have mentioned, fine role player. But Siakam was a top 30-ish player last year and was obviously very consistent for them in the playoffs. And Quentin Jackson, summer league beast. It's a solid team. I think Miami might be slightly better. I don't know though. I think this is a fascinating tier for sure. So Miami, Indiana, and the last team is the Toronto Raptors in this tier. I don't know though. Maybe I would take Indiana over Toronto, because I do think Toronto also needs a lot of things to go right. There's a lot of mouths to feed here in Toronto. I do think they will be better next year because of how many injuries they had last year, to Scotty, to Ingram, to Quickly, who I'm very in on. But they have a lot of guys that need playing time, right? Like I can count guys that should get significant playing time. Grady Dick, who was great in the first half. Numbers were not great after the start, who I think could be a big impact player if they can get in the playoffs. Jonathan Mobo was a very productive second-round pick. Brandon Ingram is going to get 30-plus minutes a night. They're paying him $40 million a year. There's a big unknown how he's going to look with Scotty and Barrett out there if Barrett doesn't get traded before the season starts. So Grady Dick, Mobo, Ingram, Scotty, Quickly, Barrett, that's 6. Colin Murray-Boyles, that's 7. Jacoby Walter, that's 8. Jakob Poeltl, that's 9. Jamal Shed, that's 10. Ochai Agbaji, that's 11. Sandro Mamukelashvili's 12. There's just a lot of guys that I think need playing time next year. And how are they all going to fit? Some guys are not going to take leaps, which is going to be unfortunate. Maybe Shed or Mobo or, I don't know, Jacoby Walter does not play as much or improve as much as you would like. I think they have the talent. And hey, can Scotty take a leap now that he's going to be healthy? Can they lean into the more Scotty as the point guard role next year? I am big on Quickly next year. I think Quickly's still a good player. Slightly overpaid, yes, but I do think was just banged up beyond belief last year, and I think should be better. I would love to know who you guys have as the best in this tier for me, my tier 4 my tier 5. Tier 4 between Miami, Indiana, and Toronto. Because I think if there's an injury to Giannis, Embiid, or Jaylen Brown, one of those teams I think will be better than them next year. For Ski and Young, I just actually have one team here, and that's going to be the Charlotte Hornets. I think the Charlotte Hornets could have not as sizable of a Pistons leap as last year, because I think the East will be better. Should be a little bit more balanced. But I do think Charlotte has the talent to maybe take a leap. Maybe being at 11, like a Portland Trailblazers leap from last year, you could say. Like maybe they don't make the playing tournament, but they look so much more competitive. I love their offseason. I really like their draft. Knipple at 3. I would have liked Edgecombe a little bit more, but Edgecombe was off the board. I think Knipple fits his team very nicely. Had a productive summer league. McNeely at the end of the first round. They need shooting. And they get Kalkbrenner and Sion James in the second. Love those pickups. They bring back Trey Mann, who was nothing for them last year because of the injury. They have Connaughton, not really going to be much of an impact player, but they bring in Spencer Dinwiddie, bring in Colin Sexton for Yusuf Nurkic, bring in Mason Plumlee, and they lose Micic, Nurkic, Okogie, and Mark Williams. Now, the Charlotte Hornets are probably going to have the worst. I would bet money that they're going to have a bottom 5 defense next year. I don't think that's a shocker. Their rim protection is some of the worst in the league. It's Kalkbrenner, Diabate, who I like, and Mason Plumlee. I mean, there's a lot of good center rotations in the NBA. This is not one of them. This is a bad rim protection. And if I have Miles Bridges out there as a 4, it's not going to be great. But they have veterans that I like in this locker room. I think Brandon Miller is in store for a big year 3, now that he's going to be healthy. You have LaMelo Ball, who, hey, when LaMelo Ball's out there, he's still a good player. He was asked to do so much shooting. He does need to scale back a little bit of the bad shots. But I think you watch any Hornets game last year, and I think Hornets fans can attest to this. There's not a lot of guys that would get creative with the ball in their hands, and they would rely on initiating a shot. So kind of late in the shot clock, they're not doing anything. They have to dish it to LaMelo, and LaMelo has to do something out of nothing. And that's why he took like a historic shot, like shot him out last year. But KJ Simpson had a good summer league. I'm just very big on LaMelo and Brandon Miller, more so Brandon Miller. And hey, if LaMelo does miss time, which has been a theme over the last few years, Colin Sexton, KJ Simpson, Nick Smith Jr., Josh Green, Spencer Dinwiddie, Trey Mann, like they have like 5 or 6 backup guard options that they can have someone initiate. I think Knipple can initiate. To even talk about T. John Salon, who can't be much worse. And this is a team that low-key's had a lot of injuries over the last few years. I think they have the depth to withstand them. If it's to a forward or guard, they do not have the depth to withstand a big man injury. But I think the Hornets can be a very fun young team that Charles Lee is going to have a lot of options at his disposal where they can actually maybe win 35 games next year, which is a big step in the right direction for Charlotte and what they need to build going forward. And they have guys they could trade off at the deadline and still be fun in the second half. Like they can move Grant Williams, but I think they like his leadership. But they could trade Colin Sexton or Josh Green next year, maybe Miles Bridges, and they'll be just fine after that. So I think Charlotte is in a tier above, at least in 2026, than the 3 teams I'm going to have and not tanking, but wink, wink. So, okay. One, I don't think they're tanking. I don't think they're frisky and young. I don't think, like, I don't want to put them in need a lot of things to go right tier with Indiana, Miami, and Toronto, but I'm having Chicago in the bottom tier. So as of now, they haven't re-signed Josh Giddey. I expect that to happen. They traded Lonzo for Okoro, and they re-signed Trey Jones. They drafted Noah Essengay, who's a little bit more of a project, and Monklon Obrick in the second round. This is a team that I think is going to be, in some way, shape, or form, worse after the deadline. I can't see Vucevic on this team, either in a trade or a buyout. I can't see him being on the roster in March. I wouldn't be totally shocked because it's the Chicago Bulls if if Kobe White and Dosunmu were on the roster after the deadline, but I wouldn't be shocked if one of them is gone. I guess it'd probably be more so Dosunmu. I think they would want to re-sign Kobe White. It just seems like what they want to do. I'm so excited about year 2 Montes Buzelis. I mentioned him in my breakout video. Patrick Williams can't be much worse. I don't think like we know what Isaac Okoro is, but hey, can improve their defense somewhat, and at least is a solid enough regular season player. Could they move Jalen Smith? We'll see. The big man depth is not great. Like it's Zach Collins, who was actually good in the second half, and so was Trey Jones, who I kind of like as the backup point guard. I would have rather have had like Derek Queen on this team, and I think Essengay can be a good player one day. Feel so bad for the Summer League dunk game he played well against Indiana, but I think he can show flashes. I don't think he's going to be very efficient in his rookie year. I just think they could be frisky and young in terms of like Giddey, Kobe White, or excuse me, no, I don't know. Do I put them in frisky and young? Like they're definitely better, I think, on paper than the next 2 teams I'm going to talk about. But I think they're going to try to quote unquote tank. I hope they finally buy into that. And I'm kind of over with this version of the Bulls. Let's just get Vooch off the team, and I think they should be okay winning 28 games, but prioritize the development of the young guys. I definitely have Washington in this tier. I think Washington is frisky and young like Charlotte, but I would be so shocked if they made the play-in tournament. Like I wouldn't be as shocked if Charlotte made the play-in tournament, right? So Washington also has, I think it's a top 8. Actually, it's top 8 protected first-round pick next year. So I think even like Will Dawkins in the Summer League was asked by, I forget who, but they were like, could you see your team taking a leap next year, like one of these young teams in the past and making the play? And he goes, we don't want to skip any steps. Yeah, they do not want to be anything outside the top 8 in the NBA draft. They want to keep their first in a good 2026 class. They were very active this offseason. Re-signed Marvin Bagley. They had Malachi Branham, who they waived actually. CJ McCollum, Dylan Jones, Kelly Olynyk, who they traded to San Antonio, Blake Wesley, and Cam Whitmore they got from the Rockets, probably the most notable or intriguing young guy there. They lose Sadiq Bey, Jordan Poole, Rashawn Holmes they waived, Anthony Gill they waived, and they waived Marcus Smart as well. They drafted Trey Johnson, Will Riley, and Jameer Watkins, and they have 4 first-round picks, 3 they drafted last year, that are going to be intriguing next year in Alex Sarr, who was number 2, Bub Carrington, who was 14, Keyshawn George, who I think was 24, and then AJ Johnson, who was drafted by the Bucks. You still have Chris Middleton. Expect him to be bought out. Him or McCollum definitely will be off this team after the deadline. And they have a lot of just young guys, like Bilal Coulibaly. This is a big year 3 for him. Can he take leaps? I want to see the leaps defensively for him. I want to see him be in those all defensive conversations next year because he has the potential to do so. I want to see Alex Sarr be a good enough rim protector and improve on the efficiency. Corey Kispert could get traded next year. They have so many wings as it is. Like, Will Riley may not play at all to start off the year. They have Justin Champagnie who could get traded. Their big man depth isn't great. Like right now, it's Alex Sarr and it's Marvin Bagley and Tristan Vukcevic, who I'm excited to watch in the Eurobasket. I don't know if he's actually going to play, but I think this is going to be a fun young team that wants to be picking in the top 8. So they're not tanking, but wink, wink. They want to see the young guys develop, but also lose games next year. And lastly, we have the Brooklyn Nets. This may be the worst team in the NBA next year. They traded Cam Johnson for Michael Porter Jr. As of now, it's not a guarantee that Cam Thomas is going to be back on this team. Doesn't feel like there's a good relationship there. They brought back Daron Sharp and Zaire Williams. They traded for Terrence Mann to get the pick that got him Drake Powell. They traded Cam Johnson for Michael Porter Jr. in their future first. And they lost D'Lo to the Mavericks and Watford to the Sixers. They drafted 5 rookies in the first round, or drafted 5 guys in the first round at a historic, or that was historic. 3 of them are initiators in Ben Suraf, Nolan Traore, and Yegor Dioman, who was, I think that's how you do it, Dioman. I've been saying Dioman, but that's wrong. Dioman, which it's a learning curve for me too, because I was saying Yegor Demon throughout the BYU phase, but he was definitely the most intriguing guy from Summer League and was drafted in the top 10 for a reason. Danny Wolf they also took, who had a bad Summer League. So did Suraf, so did Traore, and Drake Powell didn't play in Summer League. Noah Conley did not shoot the ball well last year. Dariq Whitehead is not much for them right now. They were very competitive under Jordi Fernandez last year, but I think what this team is probably telling Joe Tsai ownership that, like, we're not going to be good next year, but we need to, I guess, have guys that can swing, play unselfish basketball, and we're going to hopefully bank on the lottery, which didn't go well for them this year, that we can get Darren Peterson. I don't know why I said Ace. I meant to say AJ Debanta, Darren Peterson, or Cameron Boozer, who could be our number 1 going forward. And we can have the pieces around them that are going to complement them to that fullest degree. So, yeah, the Nets are going to be bad next year. I hope they bring back Cam Thomas. I don't think they really want to, but I think they don't want to lose the asset of Cam Thomas as well. So, yeah, that is going to be my Eastern Conference tier list. To recap, can win the conference tier 1, Cleveland, New York, Orlando. Frisky because of the exciting depth. Frisky as they can make it to a conference finals. Atlanta and Detroit. Good, but 1 injury, and I think they're going to really be out of the play-in or the playoffs in general. Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Boston. They need a lot of things to go right, but they're still a respectable roster. Toronto, Indiana, Miami. Frisky and young, the Charlotte Hornets. And not tanking, but wink, wink, they are Chicago, Washington, and Brooklyn. So that is going to be for me. Hope you guys did enjoy this episode of the Just Ballin' Podcast. If you did enjoy, I would appreciate you leaving a rating and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It helps the audio pod grow. And if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button if you're not already. Drop a thumbs up and let me know what you guys thought of the tier list in the YouTube comments as well. I'll catch you guys during Wednesday's episode. Peace.